like Travis said, I'm going to talk about posing and handling, and this is probably the area that judges are most often criticized, is the way that they pose and handle the animals. So I'm just going to do a basic overview of the general posing and handling techniques. If anybody has any questions, comments, just raise your hand, we'll address you. Okay, first we'll talk about handling. And rabbits, they're nervous and excitable by nature. So when you're handling any type of rabbit, you should use minimal restraint. I'm a manager at a veterinary clinic, and same with dogs, cats. If you go in fast and hard with the animals, they'll react to that. So the lighter touch that you have, the better. If you handle them aggressively, they're going to react to that. When you're pulling the rabbits out of the holding coop, it's always best to lift the rabbit from the underside and take them out, not scruff the rabbit, not drag them out. We want to make sure that we prevent any type of injury to the animal, so it's always best to handle them from the underside. And when you turn the rabbits over to examine for disqualifications, it's always best to use the table, the judging table, to your best advantage. If you can roll the rabbit on the table instead of lifting it in the air, you're going to have a lot less resistance, the animal's going to cooperate better, and you're going to have a whole better restraint on the animal. Big thing when you're turning animals over and getting them out of the holding coop, make sure you don't scruff the rabbits. That goes back to using minimal restraint. You scruff the animal, they're going to react to that. You can injure the pelt, so it's always best not to scruff rabbits. We need to make sure that we treat each exhibitor, or each exhibit, as if it's your very own animal. And you want to make certain that you return the rabbit in the same condition that you received it. So those are some basics on handling. Okay, on posing, there's very few variations to the standard pose between all breeds. Pretty much the hind feet are placed flat and square on the table. The toes of the rear feet are aligned with the front of the hip. The front feet are to be placed directly under the eyes. And proper posing and handling requires consistency and uniformity. So no matter how you pose the animals and handle them in your own process, just make sure you're consistent with it. You want to be consistent each time that you pose. If you're judging dwarfs, you want to make sure you pose each dwarf the same way each time. So this is a picture of a mini rex of placing the rear feet on the table. If you lift up, as demonstrated in the pictures, to set those animals, if you just pull them out of the holding coop and flop them on the table, their feet are not going to be flat and square. If you pull them out, they're not going to be posed properly. So this is just a picture demonstrating how to pose or set the rear legs. As we all know, there's 5 different body types: the semi-arch, the compact, commercial, cylindrical, and the full arch type. And for the most part, most of these, even the body type groups, even though all the animals look completely different, they're all still posed very similar. So that's something to keep in mind. Some people, when you talk about posing an Netherland dwarf and posing a Flemish, they're still posed basically the same way with their feet placement position. And we'll start with the semi-arch type group. They are longer in body. They should have a well-defined rise starting at or near the back of the shoulders. The high point of the rise occurs at the top of the hip. And still, their front feet are placed directly under the eyes. Toes of the rear feet are aligned with the front of the hip. And all breeds in this group are posed exactly the same. We have a couple of pictures an English lot that are in the mantle type. If you see the top picture, the animal's posed correctly. The feet are placed correctly, and shows a nice profile of the animal. On all these semi-arch animals, if you overpose them, push them up too far, it really distorts their overall height that they should have. They're not longer in body. It makes that shoulder start very fast. They almost look like a commercial style animal when you pose them, if you overpose those animals. If you underpose them, it makes them almost look like a Himalayan. They don't have the top line profile they should have. They're just very long, very flat in their overall body. So we want to make sure to show the best presentation of a semi-arch animal that they are posed correctly. Our next breed is our compact type animal. They're a little bit lighter in weight. They're shorter in body, but still, their front feet are placed directly under the eyes, and the front of the toes, the rear toes, are aligned with the front of the hip. Using the Florida White as an example on this, the top animal is posed correctly. You can see the profile, the overall side profile of the animal. The overposed rabbit, when you push them up so far, their back feet are not flat and square on the table. It makes them look shorter, it makes them appear to be deeper in body, but it really distorts their top line. It messes their complete profile, their side profile up. The underposed animal makes them look very long in the shoulder, makes the animal look flatter over the top of the hip and just distorts the overall side profile of the animal. Still in the compact type group, dwarfs and hollows. Their feet are still placed the same. They do have a higher head set. When you pose these animals, you want to make sure you set the rear feet and lift from the chin. You don't want to cover their head. You want to lift from the chin to have the animal posed. Their front feet should rest lightly on the table, and you want to make certain that you don't hold the head up too high and make them look like a full arch breed, like the Petites and Belgian hares. You want to make sure you don't hold their head on the table, because they are supposed to have a higher head set. You want to make sure you don't hold their head on the table, as they're opposed to years ago. The standards progressed, and the breeds really changed over the years. Here's a couple pictures of hollow knot that's correctly posed. Overposed, you can see the animal's higher on the table, has full extension of the front leg, and the underposed animal is not resting very lightly on the feet. It's somewhat pushed down. So you want to make certain that you have these animals posed correctly so you can see the side profile and overall with the chest, you can see the full aspect of these breeds. Commercial type animals are medium length in body. The depth of body should be equaling the width throughout, and still their front feet and rear feet are placed the same as other breeds. Here's the Californian example here. Top end was posed correctly. Just as the Florida White earlier that was overposed, the rear feet, they're not flat and square on the table. They tend to push out to the side and changes the overall top line of the animal. And the underposed animal makes the rabbit look very long and flat in the shoulder and just distorts the overall top line. And all these pictures are the same rabbit in each picture for all these breed examples. The same rabbits, not different animals. Just to basically show how overposing and underposing does distort the type. The only breed in the cylindrical group is the Himalayan. They should have a straight top line with no arch or rise, and their feet are also placed the same as the other breeds. When posing Himalayans, they should be stretched as long as possible with the hop still flat on the table. You position the front feet just as the other breeds. If you slide your hand down the side of the body while lifting and stretching the hind quarter, you can get the animal to relax, and you get them stretched out a little better. And you can continue that process until the animal is properly posed. Especially on the young animals, sometimes they'll want to rear up or one that hasn't been out much. Top animals are properly posed Himalayan. The overposed, you can see the rear feet hops are sticking up, they're not flat on the table. And the underposed animal, it makes it have a rise. It does have a top line to it. It's not straight across the top as our correctly posed animal. In our full arch group, and I know we have checker jacks tonight, you'll get to do some hands-on stuff, and Travis is going to bring some Petites and hares and do a few things in just a minute for those. There's two types of animals in this group, the running breeds and the posed breeds. On the running breeds, you need to let these animals loose, step back and watch the animal. You're going to watch them track down the table, stand behind them and watch their width and straightness of tracking. You want to watch their side profile view. You want to watch the full extension of their front and rear leg, the wide straight tracking, and to be able to check the side profile and spinal curve, just like this right hinder. When you put the animal on the table, you just want to step back and watch the animal move. And give them a little bit of time. When you first put them on the table, they may not move quite as well as they should. So you want to just make sure they have plenty of time to get up, move, and show themselves. On the posed breeds, still their feet placement is the same as all the other breeds we've talked about. There's a couple different variations of how to get the animal to pose, and Travis is going to pull out. What do you have first, Travis?
So what I like to do with these guys is I'm taking my thumb and I'm putting my thumb just at the very back of their mandible, and I'm just barely touching the very far back of their mandible. So my thumb is not in their throat or their neck. It's actually on their mandible. So you have a hard surface to lift and support their head with. The problem that happens with a lot of judges is they take their thumb and they're not putting their thumb on the animal's mandible. They're putting it in its throat or in its jugular, and it's actually hurting them. And then I'm taking my pointer finger and I'm supporting it just at the base of its skull. So I'm not squeezing the animal around its neck at all. I'm just barely touching it, just enough to get its head up so it stands up and will lift itself up off the ground, and it's not feeling like I'm choking it or putting pressure on its neck or spine in any way. And as you can see, it was didn't want to cooperate at all very well when I started with it, and with a light touch I was able to get it up off the table. And this also is a very young animal, so it probably hasn't been handled very much. What I like to do with my other hand is gently lift the hind quarter of the animal, and I also like to tap the hind quarter of the animal. kind of gives them a little bit more sense of security when you're touching it and handling it. So it will stretch up and stand up and round itself over the spine.
And the other pose breed in our group is the Britannia Petite.
All right, the first thing with these that I think is one of the most important is don't be afraid of it. If you're a judge and you're afraid of petites, come talk to me, come talk to a breeder that raises them, and get one for yourself so you're not afraid of it. The second you show the rabbit that you're afraid of it, or you're a little intimidated by it, you're going to have a problem. So there's 3 different variations of ways to pose them, and it's kind of tricky because every rabbit's learned a different way. A really good animal, a structurally correct animal, is going to pose readily. You're not going to have to do much with it. If it's structurally correct, then it's a really, really good animal. You should just be able to drop it on the table and it's going to pop up and pose naturally. Now keep in mind that is only its legs and its spine. It's not the shape of its head, it's not the shape of its ears. So just because it poses doesn't mean it's the best rabbit there. It might have the best leg and the best spine. So the first method that's the most common is the rolling method. You just kind of pop it up on the table and you're taking the palm of your hand and you're putting it just behind its shoulder blade and you're slowly pushing the animal up. At the same time with your fingers, you're tapping up at its lower hindquarters and tucking its lower hindquarters under. So you're tucking its hindquarters and lifting its shoulder at the same time. And you can see with this rabbit it works pretty well to get him up off the table to show himself off. Not a really good example of a petite, but you kind of get what I'm saying as far as posing it. Right? The next method is the chin lift, kind of almost exactly the same as with the Belgian hare. Although I do not suggest starting with this or trying this with a senior animal. It works best for juniors because you are kind of basically the exact same way that I pose the Belgian hare. The problem with this with seniors is a lot of seniors that pose readily or pose with the rolling lift, they don't like you touching their chin. And by the time they're a senior, they should pose naturally.